award today. We're going to be discussing everything from how you can go about finding your funding, all the way through the process to the final closeout of your hard-earned dollars. At this point, you may have or you will be receiving a few reference documents as part of today's presentation and discussion. You will and or should have received a research roadmap handout that provides several useful links for your future reference and a summary of much of what is going to be discussed today. You may have also received a draft document of the general roles and responsibilities that span across our research enterprise. This is a new working document, and it's intended to kind of provide some assistance to the newer members of the UNM research community on where to possibly start, who to contact, where to possibly start if you have some general questions. This is a draft document. It's continuing to be refined and eventually will be on our website. But for now, it's been provided to you in Excel format so that as you're going through these presentations over the next several days, there's a column out to the far right, it says notes, allows you to make your own notes and kind of put some of your own key guidance, as everybody's college and or departments may do things just a little bit differently, which could change who you should be reaching out to first. So with that said, I'm going to take a quick minute, kind of introduce to you the speakers that are going to guide you on this new road, and we'll get into it. So first, we have Vince Saracino. He's our amazing FRSO in the College of Arts and Sciences. Vince has a vast experience. Prior to joining Arts and Sciences, he gained experience as a contract and grant administrator for the Center for High-Tech Materials. And then he moved on to being a senior program administrator for the UNM Cancer Center before joining the FRSO team in Arts and Sciences. We have Tim Wester, Great Northern Lights there, one of our contract and grant administrators and an unquestioned leader in the Office of Sponsored Projects and a key member of the UNM proposal team. Melissa Sanchez, our senior project specialist. She's a contract team lead. She's actually started her career with UNM as a student employee and has kind of continued to grow her career with UNM as an expert contract negotiator and a leader on the OSP contracts team. And finally, we have very important Jessica Armijo, our contract and grant accounting manager. She is a UNM graduate. She started her career working for a CPA firm, and lucky for us, she chose to come back to UNM and started her career in contract and grant accounting in 2011 as an accountant too, and has continued with C&G in ever increasingly complex roles. We're very lucky to have them all with us here today, and I'll now turn it over to them to guide you on this roadmap to success.
Thanks, Mark. So I'm going to start out by talking about the, sorry, losing my place here. I'm going to start out by talking about the, so Tim, if you could go all the way to the research roadmap. So we already did the introductions. And then next slide. There we go. So I'm going to talk about the proposal development phase of the roadmap, which is outlined in yellow, starting with finding funding. So UNM subscribes to 2 different databases to help faculty and staff find external funding. The first is Pivot, and Pivot is a database that contains funding opportunity announcements from federal, state, local foundations, international organizations, you name it, and it's probably on Pivot. On your handout, there is a link to Pivot, and you can sign up using your UNM email. And the second database is the Foundation Directory Online that can be accessed through the university libraries to any UNM faculty or staff logged into My UNM. The Foundation Directory Online is a searchable database for foundation funding, US primarily, United States foundation funding, and it's good for, or it's great for finding funding for projects in the arts and humanities. The third resource is grants.gov, which is a listing of all federal funding opportunity announcements, such as the National Science Foundation and the National Institutes of Health. And then finally, the Faculty Research Development Office, or the FRDO, manages and maintains a list of all of the limited competitions for the university. So sometimes funding agencies will limit the number of submissions from an organization. So the FRDO manages the internal selection process for these types of proposals. And you can find a listing of all of the limited competitions on the FRDO website. And a few tips to look out for as you're searching for funding opportunities. It's important to closely review qualifications and limitations on the announcement. You want to make sure that the PI is eligible, that UNM is eligible. Sometimes our solicitations will have expiration dates. You also want to see if it's a limited competition. Next slide. So after you reviewed the announcement and verified that UNM is eligible, the PI is eligible, it's not a limited competition, it's time to develop the proposal. You should begin by closely reviewing agency guidelines for instructions, budget information, what are allowable and unallowable costs, what is the agency deadline date. So after you've reviewed the deadline, you should immediately create a Cayuse SP record. Cayuse SP is the database that UNM uses for developing and managing proposal submissions to the Office of Sponsored Projects, or OSP. You will need to create a Cayuse account to create a Cayuse SP record, and you can sign up on the OSP website. So after you started the record, received a Cayuse record number, you should immediately schedule an appointment with OSP for the review of the grant before it is submitted to the agency. So at UNM, OSP is the only office that has the authority to sign and submit proposals. Tim will talk a little bit more about the appointment process in the next phase, but I did want to make a point to schedule your appointment with OSP as soon as possible. So you've reviewed the guidelines, you've created the Cayuse record, scheduled the appointment. The next step that I recommend is creating a checklist of all the proposal elements. There are templates for the budget justification on the OSP website to help you develop your budget. I recommend downloading new templates every time you work on a proposal. Oftentimes rates can change, and OSP is always updating these templates with the most current information. If you have questions about how to use the budget templates or how to develop a checklist, please contact FRDO, my office. We can help walk you through the process, and please do use this as a resource. And then let's see, okay, we're already on the next slide. So after you finalize the budget, it's time to finalize all documents on the agency portal or Cayuse 424. So if you're submitting a federal grant, UNM uses Cayuse 424 for electronic submission to federal opportunities. You want to work with your PI to upload final technical documents, as well as finalize the Cayuse SP record and check for compliance. Some projects may have human subjects, animals, biohazardous materials, export control, and you should work with your PI to check the appropriate boxes in both Cayuse SP and Cayuse 424. And one tip is you also want to allow at least 2 business days for routing the Cayuse SP record for internal approvals. So the PI will need to certify the record, the department chair, and the dean for each school or college. So if there are multiple departments and multiple colleges and schools involved, then obviously you want to allow even more time for those more complex proposals. And now Tim is going to talk about the next phase in the roadmap, which is the outlined in purple, the Office of Sponsored Projects.
How you doing, everybody? Working with the Office of Sponsored Projects starts when a proposal appointment request. The form is filled out online on our website, and when it's received by OSP. The scheduler will work with you to coordinate a date and a time for the review appointment. Appointments are based on availability of our office on a first come, first served basis. Once the date and the time are set, the scheduler assigns the proposal to a proposal specialist for a scheduled comprehensive proposal review and submission appointment. It's recommended to get the appointment on the books 5 or more days before the deadline. Most sponsors will send out their solicitations well in advance of the deadline. And you want to set your appointment for 2 or more days before the deadline. Appointments can be 2 to 4 hours long. Normally non-federals are 2 hours and federals are 4 hours. Yes, it actually takes 4 hours to fully review your proposal. Solicitations, we review them for compliance terms and conditions, the dates, eligibility limitations, liabilities. We review your budget, your salary reports, fringe, tuition, insurance, escalation rates, F&A, cost share. We review your statement of work for things like pagination, margins, font size, page limits, and then of course your submission portal compliance and completeness. But don't worry, you don't have to be available for the entire 4 hours. We always ask that you be available for the last half of the appointment. And you don't have to be there in person, obviously, either by phone or by email. And but what if there's a last minute proposal, or if there's less than 5 days before the deadline? OSP must still review all proposals prior to submission per the UNM policy. So even if it is last minute, don't worry, we got you covered. We've got what's called an unscheduled essential component review. Although the scope and duration of that review will be limited, we're still complying with UNM policy. The PI is solely responsible for all the proposal materials outside of the OSP reviewed items. So we're just reviewing it for basic compliance at that point. You will or have received a handout highlighting the benefit of a comprehensive proposal review. And then once the proposal is submitted, you wait until you receive a notice of award.
Congratulations, UNM has been awarded. We have either received the award in the form of a grant, cooperative agreement, or contract. If we've received a grant or cooperative agreement, OSP's award team will process this award. If we've received a contract or subcontract, OSP's contracts team will process this type of award. Each team has its own email address where awards can be sent for processing. Those email addresses are available on OSP's website under the Contact OSP tab. Next slide. Once we receive the award, we will review the CAIUS record as well as the award documents and all applicable attachments. The review process can vary as we often, but not always, need to work with other internal UNM compliance offices. Some examples are if there are things like safeguarding requirements that will need IT review. If there's any work that involves human subjects research, that will require IRB involvement. If there are export control restrictions, such as restrictions on participation of foreign nationals, that would require export controls review and approval. And then also sometimes we need to work with Office of University Counsel, or OUC, on some of the legal language. So some issues that we often run into are if sponsors don't want to remove things like warranty language, indemnification, if the governing law is outside of the state of New Mexico. So such things like that would involve OUC. Next slide. We also review the award documents and all applicable attachments in order to ensure the terms and conditions are in compliance with laws, regulations, and university policies, procedures, and standard practices. The purpose of this is to maintain protection of rights for the university as well as its faculty and staff involved in the work. Next slide. If any terms and conditions present an issue for UNM, with the help of internal compliance reviews, we will work with the sponsoring agency to negotiate as necessary. The time frame for negotiations can vary depending on many factors, such as any of the internal compliance reviews that need to take place, as well as coming to agreement on all terms and conditions with the sponsor. At times, there may not be a need for any negotiations, which you'll find is more common with grants and sometimes with cooperative agreements. Some helpful tips are for contract-related work, OSP does have several already approved templates. They're approved by OUC, and use of those templates can sometimes cut down on negotiation times if the sponsor doesn't have any changes to the terms and conditions or only has minimal changes that don't require OUC's approval. Those are not available on OSP's website, but we can always provide them upon request. Another tip is for contracts, the earlier that we can begin the negotiation, the better. So if you receive a contract or really any type of award document, please get it to our office sooner than later. It can be really challenging and stressful when we don't receive award documents with enough time to do the necessary reviews and/or negotiations. Once negotiations are finalized, if any were needed, we then route the award for signature by our University Controller's Office. Next slide. When the agreement has been fully executed, awards team then finalizes the case record by funding it. Next slide. They then route all necessary award documents over to contract and grant accounting for index assignment on that award. Next.
Hi, I'm Jessica Armijo from the Contracts and Grants Office. And once a new transmittal is received in our office, the fiscal monitor will set up the award and banner and request a new index. An email will then be sent to the department notifying them that the award has been set up along with the new index number. One pro tip to mention is if a contract or grant hasn't been awarded yet, but you need to start spending the funds, you can process a request to spend funds, also known as an RTSF, so that the award can be set up in banner and an index issued so you can start spending the funding before the award has been received. Please note that in order to do this, you have to work with the Office of Sponsored Projects to initiate the RTSF. Next slide, please. During the period of performance, the fiscal monitors and accountants will approve all JVs, EPAFs, labor redistributions, requisitions, P-card exceptions, and Chrome River reports to verify that expenses are allowable, allocable, and reasonable costs on the award. The fiscal monitors will also handle the billing, financial requests, audit requests, and any budget revisions. One pro tip is that you can schedule salary and general ledger reports to run monthly in my reports so that all expenses are reviewed in a timely manner. Next slide, please. In workflow, you will get a 90-day notification that the award is ending soon. If you know that the award is continuing with additional funding, please select the extension button and add a note that the award is continuing and expecting more funding. If the principal investigator needs to request a no-cost extension, it is crucial that the workflow is completed as soon as possible. There are some agencies that require that the no-cost extension is requested 2 months to 45 days in advance before the award ends. If the award is getting more funding or there is a no-cost extension, the workflow will be forwarded to the OSP for processing, which Melissa will go over in the next slides.
So at times there may be a need to extend the award, which we may receive directly from the sponsoring agency, or we may request or submit for continuation. These extensions can be in the form of supplemental funding from the sponsoring agency, which is additional funding, usually for additional work and sometimes additional time. No cost extensions to extend the period of performance to complete the scope of work, or continuation awards, which may require submitting a proposal to a sponsoring agency or may just be issued to UNM without having to submit, which depends on the particular sponsor that we're working with. In all cases, these will need to come through OSP to assist with processing to avoid delays in your award. A helpful tip on this is that it's helpful for OSP when you reach out regarding an extension to the award if you provide us with the existing award number and or the CAIUS record it's related to. Next slide. Again, OSP will receive an award for continuance of the existing project. In most cases, this typically comes in the form of an amendment to the existing award. Next slide. We will run through the same process to determine compliance where applicable and get the award executed and over to contract and grant accounting.
Once the transmittal is received for the no-cost extension or continuation, the fiscal monitor will update the budget and our dates in Banner and will continue to help monitor the award. Another pro tip is to make sure all expenses are reviewed monthly to verify that they belong on the award. If you are processing a JV or a labor redistribution 90 days before the transaction date, a 90-day memo will be required to justify and move the expense. Next slide. Again, you will get a 90-day workflow before the award end date. Once the workflow is received from the department indicating that the award is closing, the fiscal monitor will send closeout documents and workflow that need to be signed and returned. Once the documents are completed, the department will send them back in the workflow. Another pro tip is if a progress report is due from the principal investigator, please verify that it has been completed. There are some agencies that will not pay the final payment until the progress report is completed, which prolongs the closeout process in our office. This concludes our session, and the next slides contain contact information for each of our offices. Here's the contact information for the Faculty Research Development Office. Next slide. The contact information for the Office Sponsored Project Proposal Team. The contact information for the Office Sponsored Project Contracts Team. And finally, the Contract and Grant Accounting Office. If you guys have any questions.
Thank you, everybody, and Tim and Jessica, Melissa, Vince. We ran out a little bit of time on a previous session, so worked hard in this session to ensure that in this, especially in the beginners group, that you guys have some time to ask questions. Utilize the experts that are available to you at this point. So if you have any questions, please utilize the raise hand feature in Zoom, and Pamela can open it up so that you can ask questions of anyone here on that's presented to you today.